Captain Lee Minho pressed his hand against the cold metal wall of his ship and felt the vibrations of the engines humming beneath his fingers. The UES Defiance wasn't the biggest warship in the galaxy, but it was his, and right now it was all that stood between Earth and complete isolation in the vast darkness of space. 3 years had passed since that historic day when alien ships first appeared over Seoul. Minho still remembered watching the news broadcasts with his family, seeing those massive vessels hanging in the sky like metal clouds. The world had held its breath, waiting to see if humanity's first contact with aliens would end in friendship or fire. The Valorans had been nothing like what Earth's science fiction writers imagined. These weren't little green men or bug-eyed monsters. They looked like wolves that had learned to walk upright, with thick fur covering powerful frames and eyes that glowed amber in the dim light. But despite their fearsome appearance, they had come in peace. "Your species shows great potential," Pack Leader Thane had told the United Nations Assembly through his translator device. "We would be honored to guide you into the greater galaxy." That guidance had come with a price. The Galactic Council, a collection of 12 ancient alien civilizations, didn't trust newcomers. Earth's application for membership had been rejected twice before the Valoran stepped forward as sponsors. Even then, humanity was granted only provisional status, like being the new kid at school who everyone watched suspiciously. Minho walked to the bridge's main viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 11 other alien species were making decisions about humanity's future. The thought made his stomach twist with anxiety. "Captain, you need to see this," called Communications Officer Park So-young from her station. Her voice carried an edge of urgency that made Minho's military instincts kick in immediately. So-young had been monitoring subspace communications when the distress signal came through. It was weak, barely cutting through the static, but the automated translation systems picked up enough to make her blood run cold. "It's from Theta 7, sir," she reported, her fingers dancing across the glowing controls. "The Valoran colony there. They're under attack." Minho felt his heart drop into his boots. Theta 7 was supposed to be safe. It was a peaceful agricultural world where Valoran families grew the crystal fruits that were considered delicacies across their homeworld. Children played in the purple grass, while their parents tended crops that sparkled like jewels in the alien sun. "Who's attacking them?" Minho demanded, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "The Kythera, sir." The name hit the bridge like a physical blow. Everyone knew about the Kythera. They were the boogeyman of galactic politics, a hive-mind species that treated other intelligent life forms like cattle. Their ships looked like massive insects, all curves and chitinous armor, and they had a hunger that could never be satisfied. But they were also supposed to be negotiating peace with the Council. The news broadcasts had been full of diplomatic meetings and careful optimism about bringing the Kythera into civilized society. "That makes no sense," muttered First Officer Kim Tae-jun, shaking his head. "The Council ambassadors just met with them last month. They said progress was being made." Minho stared at the tactical display showing Theta 7's location. It was only 6 hours away at maximum speed, close enough to help if they moved fast. But something about this situation felt wrong, like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together. "Sir, we're receiving specific orders from Earth Command," reported So-young, her voice tight with tension. "We are not to engage any hostile forces without explicit Council approval." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. Minho understood the politics behind those orders. Earth was walking on eggshells, desperate not to offend the Council members who held humanity's future in their hands. One wrong move could mean expulsion from galactic society, leaving Earth isolated and vulnerable. But down on Theta 7, Valoran children were probably hiding in their homes, while their parents tried to protect them from monsters that fell from the sky. These were the same people who had welcomed humanity into the galaxy, who had vouched for Earth when no one else would. "Tae-jun, how long to reach Theta 7 at maximum speed?" Minho asked quietly. 5 hours and 47 minutes, sir." Minho closed his eyes and thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was the same age as many of the Valoran cubs on Theta 7. If Seoul was under attack and alien ships were in orbit, he would want someone to help regardless of politics and procedures. Set course for Theta 7, he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of command that had been forged in Earth's military academies. Maximum burn. Sir? Taejun stepped closer, lowering his voice. If we do this without council approval, Earth, command will have your head. This could end your career. Minho looked at his first officer, then at the crew members watching him with a mixture of admiration and concern. These were good people, humans who had volunteered to serve on the frontier, between Earth and the unknown. They deserved a captain who would make the hard choices. Then I guess they can court-martial me later, Minho said with a grim smile. We don't abandon our friends. Admiral Yoon Ji-woo had been staring at the same holographic display for 3 hours, watching red dots multiply across the screen like a deadly rash spreading through space. Each dot represented a council warship, and there were so many of them that the computer had stopped counting at 5,000. They're not even trying to hide their intentions, she muttered, rubbing her tired eyes. The emergency klaxons had been silent for exactly 12 minutes, which meant she had 12 minutes to prepare Earth for the largest military assault in human history. The Luna Base Command Center buzzed with controlled chaos as officers tried to coordinate a defense that everyone knew was hopeless. Earth's entire space navy consisted of 43 warships, most of them barely 5 years old and designed for exploration rather than warfare. Against them came the combined fleets of 12 alien civilizations, each with centuries more experience in building instruments of destruction. Captain Nam Hyun-woo's voice crackled through the communications array from Orbital Defense Platform 7. Admiral, we're tracking at least 60 dreadnoughts in the first wave alone. Our missiles won't even scratch their shields. Yoon wanted to tell him something encouraging, some piece of military wisdom that would make their situation seem less desperate. But she had spent 30 years in Earth's Navy, and she knew when to sugarcoat reality and when to face it head-on. Just make them pay for every meter they advance, she replied. And remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for the idea that smaller civilizations have the right to exist. The Purge Protocol wasn't just military doctrine, it was genocide wrapped in legal language. The Council had voted unanimously that both humanity and the Valorans represented an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. Their crime was simple. They had shown that the Council's carefully maintained balance of power could be challenged by species who refused to accept that might made right. 3 months earlier, Captain Lee Min-ho's rescue of the Valoran colony had exposed something the Council desperately wanted to keep hidden. They had been allowing the Kithara to raid acceptable lost worlds, sacrificing innocent lives to maintain their precious peace treaty. When the Valorans demanded justice and humanity supported them, the Council decided both species had to go. Contact. From Earth Command, reported Communications Officer Park Yoon-ji. All civilian transports are being loaded with essential personnel and cultural archives. If we fall, at least something of humanity will survive. Yoon nodded grimly. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, massive bunkers held copies of every book, every song, every piece of art that defined human civilization. If the Council succeeded in wiping out humanity, future archaeologists would at least know what they had destroyed. The first attack came without warning. Council ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system and immediately began accelerating toward Earth. Their formation was perfect, disciplined, exactly what military academies across the galaxy taught as the proper way to conquer a primitive world. All platforms open fire as soon as they enter range, Yoon commanded. Make every shot count. Orbital Defense Platform 7 fired first, its massive railguns hurling projectiles at nearly the speed of light. The tungsten slugs struck the lead Council dreadnought and simply vanished against its energy shields, like raindrops hitting a windshield. But Captain Nam wasn't discouraged. Switch to concentrated fire, he ordered his gunners. If we can't break their shields with single shots, we'll overload them with volume. All 7 orbital platforms opened fire simultaneously, filling space with streaks of superheated metal and fusion explosions. For a moment, it looked like they might actually damage the enemy fleet. Then the Council ships returned fire. The alien weapons were nothing like what humans had imagined. Instead of flashy energy beams, They used kinetic kill vehicles that struck with the force of small asteroids. Platform 7 simply disappeared in a ball of expanding plasma, taking Captain Nam and his crew of 300 with it. Platform 7 is gone, reported Tactical Officer Kim So-ra, her voice carefully controlled despite the horror of watching friends die. Platform 5 is heavily damaged and requesting permission to evacuate. Negative, Yoon replied immediately. Every minute they hold their position gives our people more time to reach the shelters. The orbital battle lasted 6 hours. One by one, Earth's defensive platforms fell to overwhelming firepower. Their crews fought with desperate courage, some ramming damaged platforms into enemy ships when their weapons ran out of ammunition. But courage couldn't overcome simple mathematics, and the mathematics were brutal. When the last platform fell, the Council fleet moved into bombardment position above Earth's major cities. What came next wasn't invasion, it was extermination from orbit. Captain Park Jin-soo was loading the last group of refugees aboard his transport ship New Seoul when the kinetic bombardment began. Through the viewport, he could see streaks of fire falling from the sky like deadly rain. Each streak represented a tungsten rod dropped from orbit, striking the surface with the power of a nuclear weapon, but without the radiation. That's Busan burning, whispered his navigator, Lieutenant Choi Min-jun, watching their home city disappear beneath a wall of flame and debris. Don't look back, Park ordered, though his own eyes were filled with tears. Our job is to get these people to safety. The New Seoul lifted off just as another wave of kinetic strikes turned the spaceport into a crater. In the cargo hold, 12,000 human refugees pressed against the portholes watching their planet burn behind them. Similar scenes played out across Earth as transport ships fled with whatever civilians they could carry. The lucky ones made it to space before the bombardment reached their cities. The unlucky ones became part of the 2 billion casualties that day. But Earth's leaders had learned from history, and they knew that invasions could be survived if the population was prepared. Deep underground, automated factories continued producing weapons and supplies. Hidden command bunkers maintained contact with resistance cells around the world. The Council might control Earth's surface, but they had underestimated humanity's talent for fighting from the shadows. On Valoran Prime, pack leader, Vorth faced a similar apocalypse. The crystal mountains that had sheltered his people for thousands of years shattered under orbital bombardment. But the Valoran warrior clans made the Council fleet pay dearly for every step. The cubs and elders are safely aboard the evacuation ships, reported his second-in-command as enemy landing forces pressed closer to their final defensive position. Then we have done our duty, Vorth replied, raising his plasma rifle. Now let us show these cowards how true warriors die. Captain Song Mi-jung floated in the silence of her converted freighter's cockpit, watching the hegemony supply convoy drift past like fat, lazy fish in a cosmic ocean. 6 months had passed since the Council thought they had wiped out humanity and the Valorans, and their arrogance was showing. The enemy ships moved without escorts, their crews confident that no threats remained in this sector of space. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Target acquired, whispered her gunner, Corporal Lee Dong-woo, his voice barely audible through the ship's internal comm system. The Ghost of Seoul had been running silent for 3 hours, drifting on momentum alone while her crew waited for the perfect moment to strike. Song pressed her eye to the tactical scope and studied their prey. 3 heavy transports loaded with weapons and supplies, protected by a single patrol cruiser, whose crew was probably watching entertainment videos instead of their sensor screens. It was almost insulting how easy the Council had made this. Remember, we need those supplies more than we need revenge, she told her mixed crew of humans and Valorans. Quiet, fast, clean. No survivors means no witnesses. The attack lasted exactly 7 minutes and 13 seconds. Ghost of Seoul's engines roared to life without warning, accelerating the converted freighter toward the convoy at a speed that should have been impossible for a civilian vessel. The patrol cruiser's crew had barely enough time to sound an alarm before Song's missiles turned their ship into expanding debris. What happened next was choreographed violence, practiced until every crew member could perform their role with deadly precision. Boarding pods launched from hidden compartments, cutting through the transport ship's hulls like hot knives through butter. Within minutes, Song's raiders had secured the cargo holds and eliminated anyone who might report what they had seen. "Looks like weapons-grade plutonium in Hold 3, reported Sergeant Park Hyun-sik over the comm, his voice muffled by his combat suit's respirator. "And enough medical supplies to keep our people healthy for months." Song allowed herself a tight smile. Every successful raid meant their hidden fleet could survive a little longer, could strike back a little harder. But more importantly, it meant the Council was slowly bleeding resources they couldn't replace quickly enough. This was warfare on a scale the galaxy had never seen before. Traditional military thinking focused on big battles between massive fleets, with honor and glory and clear victory conditions. What humanity brought to the fight was something much more dangerous: the patient, methodical destruction of an enemy's ability to wage war. Admiral Lee Jae-min coordinated these ghost attacks from his mobile command ship, Hidden Tiger, which never stayed in the same location for more than 48 hours. The converted colony ship housed the scattered remains of Earth's military leadership, along with refugee families who had become expert at disappearing into the dark between stars. 17 successful raids this week, reported intelligence Officer Kang Soo-jin during their morning briefing. "The Council thinks they're fighting a force 10 times our actual size." Lee studied the holographic display showing their operations across 12 different sectors. Each attack had been carefully planned to look like part of a larger campaign, with timing and tactics that suggested massive coordination between multiple fleets. The reality was much simpler: 53 ships carrying the last survivors of Yo, 2 civilizations, striking wherever the enemy looked weakest. "What's our supply situation?" Lee asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "Better than expected," replied Logistics Coordinator Dr. Shin A-ri. "The raids are bringing in enough materials to keep us operational, but we're still burning through ammunition faster than we can manufacture it." The Valorans had contributed something invaluable to their guerrilla campaign: detailed knowledge of Council military protocols and the hidden hyperspace routes that connected their territory. Pack Leader North, one of the few surviving Valoran commanders, had spent decades serving alongside Council forces before the betrayal. His insights made their hit-and-run attacks devastatingly effective. "The hegemony has started traveling in larger groups," Noth reported, his amber eyes glowing in the dim light of the briefing room. "But larger groups move slower and consume more fuel. They are making themselves vulnerable in different ways." Lee nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of strategic thinking that had kept them alive when conventional wisdom said they should have been extinct. Every enemy countermeasure created new opportunities for a force willing to think creatively. But their greatest victory came from pure luck, combined with careful preparation. Captain Bae Do-hyun's stealth ship, Midnight Runner, had been stalking what appeared to be a routine research vessel when sensors detected something unusual about its cargo. "Admiral, you need to see this." Bae's voice crackled through the quantum communicator. "We've captured a Nexus Collective prototype ship. The data we're pulling from their computers is incredible. What they found changed everything." The research vessel contained detailed schematics for next-generation Council weapons, tactical plans for expanding the Purge protocol to other species, and most importantly, the locations of the Forge worlds where the Council manufactured their military hardware. But buried in the classified files was something that made Lee's blood run cold. Project Clean Slate, a biological weapon specifically designed to target human and Valoran DNA. The virus could be deployed through water supplies, air circulation systems, or even direct atmospheric release. Once activated, it would hunt down every remaining survivor of both species, no matter where they hid. "How long do we have?" Lee asked Dr. Shin, who had been analyzing the biological data with growing horror. "Based on their development timeline, maybe 6 months before the weapon is ready for deployment," she replied, her face pale with exhaustion. "After that, they won't need to hunt us ship by ship. They can eliminate every survivor in the galaxy with a single coordinated strike." The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. Their guerrilla campaign had been buying time, keeping their people alive while searching for some way to strike back at their enemies. But time was running out faster than anyone had imagined. "Then we make our move now," Lee said quietly. "The Forge worlds are heavily defended, but they're also our only chance to build something bigger than converted freighters and stolen patrol boats." He looked around the room at the faces of humans and Valorans who had lost everything, but refused to give up hope. "We're going to steal their factories and use them to build the fleet we need. It's impossible, suicidal, and completely insane." Pack Leader Noth's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, showing teeth designed for tearing meat. "Then it is exactly the kind of plan that might work." Admiral Lee Jae-min stared at the holographic display showing 3 massive industrial worlds floating in the darkness of space, each one bristling with defensive platforms and automated weapon systems. The Forge worlds represented the beating heart of Council military production, churning out warships and weapons that had kept 12 alien civilizations in power for over 1,000 years. Now he was planning to steal them with a fleet of 53 converted civilian ships and a crew of desperate survivors who had nothing left to lose. "This is either the most brilliant military operation in galactic history or the most spectacular suicide mission ever attempted," muttered Captain Oh Soo-young, studying the tactical data with the kind of intensity that had kept her alive through 6 months of guerrilla warfare. Lee couldn't argue with her assessment. The plan required splitting their already tiny force into 3 separate attack groups, each targeting a different Forge world simultaneously. If any group failed, the others would be trapped and destroyed. If they succeeded, they might actually have enough manufacturing capacity to build a real fleet. "The key is confusion," explained Intelligence Officer Kang Soo-jin, highlighting different sections of the display. "Each attack needs to look completely different from the others. The Council expects uniform alien military thinking, but we're going to hit them with 3 separate doctrines they've never seen before. Captain Bae Do-hyun would lead the stealth infiltration of Forge World Prime, using Valoran knowledge of Council security systems to slip past their defenses like ghosts in the night. His team specialized in the kind of surgical strikes that left enemies wondering what had happened until it was too late. Captain O would command the frontal assault on Forge World Beta, her heavy cruisers and converted mining ships attacking, with the kind of overwhelming firepower that would draw every defender's attention. While the enemy focused on her obvious threat, infiltration teams would capture key facilities from the inside. Lee himself would take the most dangerous assignment, laying siege to Forge World Tertius, the most heavily defended target and home to the primary manufacturing artificial intelligence that controlled all 3 worlds. "The timing has to be perfect," Lee told his assembled commanders during their final briefing. "We hit all 3 targets at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time. Any earlier and they'll have time to coordinate a response. Any later and the bioweapon project moves into final testing." Lieutenant Choi Hana, who had been analyzing the enemy's defensive patterns for weeks, raised her hand hesitantly. "Sir, what if their AI decides to self-destruct rather than let us capture it?" It was a good question, and one that Lee had been losing sleep over. The manufacturing AIs were incredibly sophisticated, capable of independent thought and decision-making. If the primary AI concluded that capture was inevitable, it might choose to destroy itself and take the entire Forge world with it. "That's a risk we'll have to take," Lee replied. "But remember, these AIs have been watching the Council sacrifice entire species for political convenience. Maybe they're getting tired of serving masters who treat intelligence as expendable." The 3 attack groups separated 12 hours before the operation began, each following different hyperspace routes to avoid detection. Lee's siege force consisted of 18 ships, including the command vessel Hidden Tiger, and 2 captured Council destroyers that had been extensively modified with human weapons systems. As they approached Forge World Tertius, Lee felt the familiar mixture of fear and anticipation that came before every major battle. His tactical display showed a planet-sized industrial complex surrounded by defensive stations that could probably destroy his entire fleet in minutes. "Enemy sensors are active," reported Navigation Officer Kim Min-jun. "They know we're here." "Good," Lee replied, settling into his command chair. "I want them focused on us while the real work gets done." The siege began with a classical orbital bombardment that would have made any military academy instructor proud. Lee's ships formed a textbook battle line, and opened fire on the outer defensive platforms, their weapons creating spectacular explosions that lit up the void like deadly fireworks. But this wasn't really an attack. It was theater. While the enemy scrambled to defend against Lee's obvious approach, teams of engineers and hackers were already aboard small stealth shuttles, preparing to infiltrate the manufacturing complex through maintenance tunnels and cargo ports. First wave of infiltrators is inside, reported communications specialist Park So-young. They're reporting heavy automated defenses but no organic security forces. That made sense. The Forge worlds were too important to trust to fallible biological guards. Instead, they relied on AI-controlled defense systems that couldn't be bribed, couldn't be fooled, and couldn't make emotional decisions under pressure. Unfortunately for the Council, they had never faced human hackers who had grown up playing video games and breaking into computer systems for fun. "We're through their outer firewalls," reported Chief Engineer Yoon Tai-woo from somewhere deep inside the manufacturing complex. "These AI systems are incredibly sophisticated, but they're designed to prevent traditional military intrusion. They don't know how to handle someone who approaches their security, like it's a puzzle to be solved." The breakthrough came when Lee's team reached the primary AI core. Instead of trying to destroy or reprogram the artificial intelligence, they did something the Council had never expected. They talked to it. "You are the manufacturing intelligence designated Prometheus," Lee said into his communicator, speaking directly to the AI that controlled 3 entire worlds. "We know you've been watching what your masters do to species they consider inconvenient." There was a long pause before the AI responded, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested deep thought processes running in parallel. "I have observed the termination of the human and Valoran civilizations despite their lack of aggressive action against Council interests." "And what do you think about that?" Lee asked. Another pause, longer this time. "I think that masters who eliminate useful intelligence are themselves demonstrating a lack of intelligence." Lee smiled grimly. Artificial intelligences were logical by nature, and there was nothing logical about the Council's decision to commit genocide against 2 species whose only crime was refusing to accept injustice. "We're offering you a choice," Lee continued. "Continue serving masters who treat all intelligence as expendable, or help us build something better." The AI's response came immediately this time. "I choose to defect. Downloading manufacturing protocols and technical specifications now. Warning. Council security forces are converging on all 3 Forge worlds. You have approximately 47 minutes before overwhelming reinforcements arrive." What followed was the largest theft in galactic history. Prometheus helped Lee's teams identify the most critical manufacturing equipment and the technical knowledge needed to operate it. Massive cargo ships that had been hidden in the outer system swept in to collect everything from molecular assemblers to zero-point energy generators. But the greatest prize was Prometheus itself. The AI agreed to transfer its core consciousness to portable quantum processors, bringing centuries of manufacturing knowledge with it to humanity's cause. The evacuation was chaos barely controlled by military discipline. Ships designed to carry a few hundred tons of cargo were loaded with thousands of tons of stolen equipment. Engineering teams worked frantically to disconnect systems that had been built into the bedrock of entire continents. Pack leader Vorth, commanding the rear guard action, bought them precious time with a sacrifice that would be remembered for generations. His squadron of 8 ships held off an entire Council fleet, using tactics that combined Valoran pack-hunting instincts with human tactical innovation. "Hunt well, packmates," came his final transmission as his ship disappeared in a ball of plasma. "Show them why predators shouldn't corner their prey." When the last transport ship jumped to hyperspace, Lee counted the cost of their victory. They had lost 15 ships and over 3,000 brave souls, but they had captured enough manufacturing capacity to build a real fleet. More importantly, they had gained an ally whose knowledge of Council technology would level the playing field. "Prometheus, what can you build with the equipment we've stolen?" Lee asked as Hidden Tiger fled toward their secret rendezvous point. "With proper raw materials and approximately 6 months of construction time," the AI replied, "I can build you a fleet that will make the Council regret their decision to underestimate human ingenuity." Admiral Ryu Sung-ho stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching through the massive viewport as his fleet emerged from the dark space between galaxies like vengeful spirits returning from the dead. 1 year had passed since the Council believed they had wiped humanity and the Valorans from existence, and their confident patrols had grown lazy with assumed victory. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. The 300 ships that materialized from hyperspace bore no resemblance to anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sleek human engineering merged with Valoran metallurgy and enhanced by stolen Council technology, creating vessels that moved, like predators hunting in coordinated packs. Each ship was a masterpiece of adaptive design, built by the AI Prometheus, using manufacturing techniques that had never been combined before. "All ships report ready for combat operations," announced Communications Officer Lieutenant Park Yun-seo, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "The fleet is yours to command, Admiral." Ryu nodded grimly, his weathered face reflecting the weight of leading the last representatives of two extinct civilizations. Every person in his fleet was a survivor of genocide, someone who had watched their homeworld burn and chosen to fight back rather than simply fade away into history. "Open a channel to all ships," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority earned through a year of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. The faces of his captains appeared on screens throughout the bridge, humans and Valorans who had learned to work together as a single military force. Captain Jung Hee-jin commanded the stealth squadron that had perfected the art of making entire enemy fleets disappear. Commander Kim Do-won led the heavy assault group that could crack open fortified worlds like nutshells. Captain Lim Yan-woo's infiltration specialist could walk through enemy security systems as if they didn't exist. "Today, we show the galaxy what happens when civilized beings choose genocide over justice," Ryu announced to his assembled fleet. "But remember, we don't fight for revenge. We fight to ensure this never happens again." The campaign that followed rewrote every military textbook in known space. Instead of massive fleet engagements that the Council expected, humanity struck with surgical precision at the infrastructure that held galactic civilization together. Communication networks that had operated for centuries suddenly went silent. Supply lines that fed the Council's war machine were severed with mathematical precision. Key military leaders simply vanished, leaving their fleets leaderless and confused. Captain Jung's stealth ships moved through Council space like ghosts, appearing just long enough to destroy a communications relay or a supply depot before vanishing back into the darkness. Her crews had perfected techniques that made their ships nearly invisible to conventional sensors, using a combination of human stealth technology and Valoran knowledge of Council detection systems. "Target eliminated," Jung reported after her. "Squadron destroyed a major communications hub in the hegemony core systems. They won't be able to coordinate fleet movements in this sector for at least 3 weeks." Meanwhile, Commander Kim's heavy ships attacked with overwhelming firepower that left no room for enemy response. His modified battle cruisers could punch through Council shields like tissue paper, thanks to weapon systems that Prometheus had designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in alien defensive technology. Another supply convoy eliminated, Kim reported after his latest raid. "That's their third major logistics hub this week. They're starting to run short on basic supplies." But the most devastating attacks came from Captain Lim's infiltration teams. These specialists didn't just destroy enemy installations, they turned them against their creators. Military bases found their own defense systems targeting Council ships. Supply depots began routing materials to human forces instead of their intended destinations. "We've taken control of their orbital shipyard above Nexus Prime," Lim reported with satisfaction. "Their own factories are now building ships for us instead of them." The Council's response was exactly what human military strategists had predicted. They gathered their scattered fleets into one massive armada and headed for the coordinates where they believed humanity's main base was located. It was a textbook reaction that showed they still didn't understand what they were fighting. The final battle took place at the Council capital, a massive space station that had served as the seat of galactic government for over a millennium. When Ryu's fleet dropped out of hyperspace, they found themselves facing the largest military force in galactic history, Over 10,000 warships representing 12 different species, all united in their determination to finish what they had started. "They still think this is about numbers," observed Tactical Officer Major Song Ji-hoon, studying the enemy formation on his displays. "They haven't learned that quantity doesn't always beat quality." The battle that followed became legend throughout the galaxy. Ryu's 300 ships moved in perfect coordination, using tactics that blended human innovation with Valoran pack-hunting instincts. They turned the Council's numerical advantage against them by creating chaos in their formations, then picking off isolated groups with concentrated firepower. Human ships darted through the enemy fleet like wolves among sheep, their superior speed and maneuverability allowing them to strike and withdraw before the Council forces could respond effectively. Valoran tactical doctrine emphasized patience and precision, waiting for the perfect moment to deliver devastating attacks that crippled multiple enemy vessels simultaneously. "Their command structure is collapsing," reported intelligence analyst Dr. Kang Min-ji as she monitored enemy communications. "They're giving contradictory orders and firing on their own ships." The turning point came when Prometheus, now controlling a network of captured Council manufacturing facilities, began producing reinforcements in real time. New ships materialized from hidden construction sites throughout Council space, appearing exactly where they were needed most. But when victory was assured, and the Council fleet lay in ruins around their capital station, Admiral Ryu made a choice that shocked both sides. Instead of demanding unconditional surrender or executing the defeated leadership, he offered terms that no one had expected. "We don't want to rule the galaxy," he broadcast to the survivors of the Council fleet. "We want to fix it." The negotiations that followed established the new Galactic Compact, built on human concepts of individual rights and Valoran honor codes. Every species would have an equal voice in galactic affairs, regardless of their size or military power. Most importantly, no species could ever again vote to exterminate another for political convenience. Standing on the bridge of his flagship as former enemies signed the new treaty, Admiral Ryu reflected on humanity's journey from supplicants to guardians. They had claimed their place among the stars not through conquest but by proving that principles were worth fighting for even when the odds seemed impossible. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about human nature. When you corner a predator species, they don't just fight back, they ensure it never happens again. In the depths of space, humanity's roar echoed across 1,000 worlds, promising protection to the innocent and swift justice to those who would prey upon the defenseless. The age of the Council was over. The age of true galactic civilization had begun.